I'm Andrew, and welcome back to Custom Cards, where we teach you to make your own Magic the Gathering cards. Today we're designing red commons for a Norse-themed set using the categories we talked about in last week's video. Let's start with our set mechanics. Red gets Deify, Pillage, and Runes. For Deify, let's make a creature that transforms when it gets a certain amount of power. Because this probably puts you in a deck with pump spells, we can make the other side of the card reflect those spells onto all your creatures. For Pillage, we want to make cards that use the mechanic in a red way. Giving a creature haste mitigates some of the downside of returning it to your hand. Red also uses token spells. It would be interesting to give tokens Pillage, because the way tokens work is that they disappear if they would return to your hand. And let's make a pilot that can grant Pillage to the ship that it crews. This could transfer the cost of replaying a bounced creature onto a vehicle, which could be cheap to replay but have a high crew cost. That's probably enough Pillage. Let's move on to runes. I know I want one rune that's a burn spell, but dealing damage equal to the number of runes you control seems pretty weak. It wouldn't do much by itself, so let's take inspiration from Welding Sparks and let this common deal 2 plus the number of runes you control. That means it's always at least 3 damage because it counts as a rune. Last week I mentioned my disappointment that Impulse Draw hasn't made it to common yet, so let's fix that. Our second rune can Impulse Draw equal to the number of runes you control. Assuming you don't have any other runes, this is relatively weak, so 1 mana is fine. Now, because it's only 1 mana, it's fine to have the impulse last only for this turn. You'll still have the rest of your mana to play whatever you find. This helps keep the card from being overpowered if you do amass a lot of runes. We also need to make a red artifact. Because white and green get fortifications, and we gave blue and black vehicles, let's give red an equipment. Granting Menace would be helpful for getting your pillage creatures through for damage. And because we want to help out our Deify card from earlier, let's have this give power as well. Costing equipment is hard. Let's say it's 2 to equip, so it's a significant cost to re-equip after pillaging, but not backbreaking. And maybe 2 converted mana cost as well. We'll watch this card during playtesting to see if the costs could change. We could use a treason spell. With all these artifacts running around, let's just reprint Hijack. Land destruction effects cost 4 mana at common. Usually you tack on artifact destruction as well, but artifact destruction only costs 1 or 2. What could we add on that's actually worth the 4 mana we're paying? How about a burn spell? Now you'll have land destruction in your deck if you need it, because you'll be running the card for the burn spell anyway. Note that the number of damage on Red's big burn spell is important, because it determines what size of creatures Red is able to kill. So take a look at the creatures in your set and decide whether this spell needs to deal 4 or 5 damage. Because we didn't put it on the land destruction card, we need a Shatter. Let's also make it burn the artifact's controller if it has a subtype, since those are relevant. For our combat trick, let's give +2 power and trample to help pillage creatures hit the opponent. And let's also give it 2 toughness to help your creature actually survive long enough to bounce back to your hand. This, plus the equipment, can also transform our deity. Now we need more creatures. We could use a French vanilla for simplicity's sake. Because we made a fancy first striker in white, let's just make a simple one here. Rummaging will be helpful in this set to get rid of cards you got from pillaging but don't do what you want. So let's make a repeatable rummage creature. On a similar note, if you'd like to repurpose old vehicles or runes, let's make a creature that can throw them at things. Note that Red gained the ability to sacrifice its own enchantments in Theros Beyond Death. Red usually gets an oversized creature with a downside. Continuing with our artifact or enchantment theme, we could make a creature that can't attack or block unless you control one. Now that would be a fine card that you have to work for, but I noticed that there are 2 conditions on the downside and 2 things that the creature can't do. What if we split that up and it won't attack without an artifact or block without an enchantment? That plays in a similar space but makes the card a lot more interesting depending on what you want it to do. Now let's make a trample creature that can buff itself. Maybe we follow the formula of Lavakin Brawler, but care about Vikings instead. On the same note, our Panic spell can hit everyone but Vikings. Our last creature is Vanilla. Because you can make a Vanilla at any converted mana cost, it's best to design it last, once you see what you need. We don't have any 5-drops yet, so let's make a big creature. This stat line seems fine, but as it's on the stronger side of what Red gets, let's make it double red to play. Finally, I liked the blue card we made that casts cheaply when you return a creature to your hand. Let's make a similar card here. Maybe a Lava Axe that gets cheaper? This can give the pillage deck some late game reach, which it might not have because it keeps bouncing its own creatures. While red seems like a one-note color, it actually has a lot of hidden depth, and it's up to you to find it and bring it out in interesting ways. I really enjoyed making these cards, and I hope that they do a good job of utilizing that hidden depth. That's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to like and subscribe, and tell us what red commons you would design for this set. We'll be back next Thursday to talk about green common slots.